This week on Lewis on the Law, I have yet another awesome show for you. I have attorney Anamaria Hazard in with me, and we're going to talk land use and zoning.
Welcome to Lewis on the Law.
You are listening to Lewis on the Law. My name is James Lewis, and I am your host this week and every week. And I have attorney Anamaria Hazard on with me. Hey, Anamaria, how are you?
I'm good, James. How are you?
Excellent, excellent. And we've got a great topic for you guys. I love this topic, land use and zoning, and it's an area that I'm extremely interested in, and I do some work in it too. Not so much these days right now, but back in the day I did. And Anamaria is associate with Coleman Talley here in the Atlanta office, and I don't want to talk too much about everything that Coleman Talley does because I think you guys do a lot. But what's your area of specialty there?
Yeah, so my area of specialty there is land use and zoning, commercial real estate, and municipal law. And Coleman Talley, we're a full-service firm. We're in Atlanta and Valdosta, and we have about 35 attorneys, and we all do great work.
Nice. And, of course, municipal law, because you were a City of Atlanta attorney, right?
Yeah, a month ago.
Just a month ago?
Just a month ago,
Yeah.
I was an assistant city attorney for the City of Atlanta.
How was that experience?
It was great. I learned so much. I came in as a new attorney, not knowing very much at all about any kind of law, and I think I left with a pretty good specialty in zoning, and I was able to deal with all sort of cases: affordable housing, historic preservation, permitting, transportation planning, anything in the city planning, zoning, land use field. So it was a great experience.
And especially affordable housing, and that's such an important area of law. I mean, I think a lot of us who go into land use or into real estate law, property law, we're really touched by how the land actually affects everybody. I mean, when you really think about it.
Definitely.
I mean, I do some landlord-tenant issues, and for a while there, I was volunteering at the magistrate court in Atlanta. Doing some tenant defense and evictions. And, that's really heartbreaking, some of the things that happens.
Yeah. And, I think zoning in general, land use, commercial real estate, all of that stuff, it can be difficult. There are a lot of costs involved. And it's great to have people like you, people like me that are willing to help those who don't have all the resources.
Yeah. Well, zoning's a little more high-end thing. I don't actually come to see many people who come to you with a zoning need that don't have any means. Usually it's commercial. Usually they're rezoning for commercial.
And the reason why I got into land use and zoning is because people often do have zoning issues and they don't realize they have zoning issues, or they realize them too late. If you see a building going up and that you don't think that's a compatible use for your neighborhood, by the time you see the building going up, it's too late, And it's really important to be involved early on, and there are free ways to be involved, especially in the City of Atlanta. You can go to your neighborhood planning meeting. You can go to the zoning committee meetings and the Board of Zoning Adjustment meetings and the Zoning Review Board meetings. And all that are really, they're completely free ways to stay involved.
Yeah. In our neighborhood, you know what we do when the developer wants to come in? We get out there with like pitchforks and like torches and,
I mean, you could do that too. But, at the end of the day, if something's happening in your neighborhood, you should be informed. And I really, really think people need to be informed of all backgrounds and all socioeconomic status.
Yeah. When I did my first, right out of law school, the company I worked for put me in Connecticut and then New York. And so in Connecticut, I just basically did statutory analysis to work with how we cite in Connecticut. But when I was in New York, I actually had to go to zoning hearings and for special use applications, basically. And it was like, I thought people were going to like throw tomatoes at me up there. They're so rude up there. And here it's a lot different. Going to a zoning hearing here, people don't scream at you. In New York, okay, well, I haven't actually seen the screaming or yelling or the really nastiness. In New York, people were calling me bully, big corporate bully, and what do you think you are? You think you can push us around? And people were saying that to me, and I'm just like, wait a minute, I came up here to like talk to you guys, to open a dialogue.
We've had situations like that when I represent the City of Atlanta, and now with Coleman Talley, we've had situations like that. They we represent all over Georgia.
Now, with Coleman Talley, you're going to get it, but with the city of Atlanta, you're the defender of the people, right? Here.
Well, it depends which people you're asking. Some people think we are not, but I do think they do a really great job in Atlanta.
Yeah. I think they were calling the commissioners in one time. I went to Amherst, and they started calling the commissioners weasels, and
Wow.
and started accusing them of taking paybacks and all kinds of things.
Go if you go to the zoning committee meetings regularly, you'll hear it, or city council at least.
Yeah, got it. So why is zoning and land use important? Why is it important?
I think zoning and land use is important is because it really affects the built community around you. It affects what your cities look like. It affects your access to resources, which can affect your health care and your quality of education. Just your overall well-being. If your neighborhood is built next to a truck depot, then you're going to get a lot of those truck fumes, and you could have a lot of asthma.
Mm-hmm.
In areas like Brooklyn and Bronx and West Oakland, those children have much higher instances of asthma because they're by a lot of high traffic streets and freeways, and because other people in more affluent areas use their power through land use to say, we don't want that here. And so it's something that I think is really important.
That's funny because that's like New York and New Jersey, where New York dumps all their waste across the line.
Because New York said, we don't want landfills here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And New Jersey's like, okay.
Right.
So, it affects a lot, but it's something that you do have to get involved in rather early on because, I live in West Midtown, and West Midtown is a freight corridor. And so there's a lot of trucks going up and down, and now there are neighborhoods coming over there, and people don't want the trucks anymore. But, well, now where are the trucks going to go, right? Because a long time ago, someone did city planning and said this is a good place for the trucks to go. And so now we literally don't really have anywhere else for them to be.
Yeah.
And so it's really important to pay attention to land use and zoning and city planning because sometimes it just becomes too late,
Mm-hmm. Well, people are moving towards the nuisance,
They are.
So, do they have any recourse there? If they're like, okay, I love this neighborhood. It's right by a paper plant. I'm going to move into the neighborhood with the paper plant. Okay, now I don't want that paper plant there anymore.
Yeah, so once the use is there, you can't get rid of it unless they abandon the use. And in different cities, that means different things. So in the city of Atlanta, it means abandoned for 1 year. But I'm working on something now in Coweta County where they said it doesn't, you can abandon your use as long as you want. You can still keep your use. So it means different things in different areas. But what you can do is stop more paper factories from coming and stop the harm from increasing and becoming worse. But again, it requires you being involved because there are a lot of notice requirements for zoning, but they're in things like the daily report that I didn't even know existed until probably I was like 2L year in law school. They're posted
and that
on
is
the
the
city
funny
website.
thing about the notice requirements. They're always in these super obscure.
organ.
I know.
Just like, who reads that?
I know, right?
Lawyers.
Yeah, lawyers, real estate developers,
Right.
People who want to capitalize on something.
Not your grandma.
No, not your grandma, and certainly not me before I went into law. Actually, I still don't read them unless I've posted the notice, unless it's something.
I know, please make sure this is right.
Exactly. So what are we talking when we're talking land use and zoning?
So in the old sense, Euclidean zoning is basically a separation of uses.
Mm-hmm.
And so what that means is you don't necessarily want your office and industrial use next to your commercial use, next to your residential use. And so previously, it was sort of we're separating all these uses so that they don't negatively affect each other. Now it's evolving more to mixed-use developments. But
such a trendy word, mixed-use development.
Transit-oriented districts.
Yeah, TADs.
Right, but it's now we're sort of moving towards ways that we can mix these uses because separation of uses requires cars, and we've realized now that cars aren't good for our health and just not great city planning anymore. And so now it's more of how to combine uses in a compatible way. And I think, the underlying of zoning is to protect the human health, safety, and welfare, which means, no, we don't want your house next to a paper factory, but maybe it can be next to like a doctor's office, and that's fine.
Excellent. Anamaria, we are at the end of this segment, so will you give them some contact information for you real quickly?
Yeah, sure. Again, my name is Anamaria Hazard. I work at Coleman Talley. We are located at 3475 Lenox Road, Suite 400 in Atlanta, Georgia. And my email is anamaria.harzard@colemantalley.com.
You are listening to Lewis on the Law. My name is James Lewis, and I am your host this week. And here at Lewis on the Law, we are trying to empower you, the listener, with legal information. This is not to replace legal advice. If you have a serious legal issue, you need to go ahead and contract with an attorney. Don't depend on the information that you hear on this show and use that as advice. If you have legal issues in zoning or land use, you can feel free to give Anamaria. You pronounce your name Anamaria. I've been doing it Anamaria. I'm terrible. Okay, I'm terrible. But anyways, you can give Anamaria a call, and she'll be glad to help you out. You can always give me a call, and if I can't help you out, I can direct you towards an attorney who can help you out. A lot of them come on my show. When we get back, you used a fancy term, Euclidean zoning, which is like, it reminds me of Euclidean geometry. So we're going to talk about other types of zonings and affordable housing and inclusionary zoning. You are listening to Lewis on the Law. My name is James Lewis, and I am here each week to empower you, the listener, with legal information. I am so excited. I have attorney Anamaria. I want to say Anamaria. It's because I've been in the South too long, but Anamaria Hazard on with me, and she's with Coleman Talley, and we're talking land use and zoning. So when we left off, you've used a fancy term, Euclidean zoning, and that always makes me think of Euclidean geometry and all this high-level stuff. I mean, I think that geometry, it's not really that high level, but it sounds fancy.
Unfortunately, it's not that cool. It comes from a city in, I think it's in Ohio, called Euclid.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so
it still sounds really cool.
It sounds cool. I know. I was like, is this like mathy? And they're like, no, it's about a Midwest town. But it's just basically the separation of uses in your classic sense. So we want to separate residential from industrial, from office, from commercial. And it's a zoning that we are moving away from, but that's how we get things like the suburbs. So the suburbs
aren't the suburbs awesome?
Yeah. There's a really good video about the suburbs.
Is there really? I have to check that out.
Yeah, it's about the suburbs and how they're racist. But it's really good and interesting. Yeah. But, so these things were created so you have the suburbs, which tend to be residential, and then your city centers and your downtown, which tend to be commercial and office, and then you have your rural areas and your industrial areas. And in older cities like Atlanta, you can still sort of see that. And so I was talking about West Midtown before, that used to be all industrial. You get to downtown, less so. You get to like Southwest Atlanta, and it's all residential, things like that.
Yeah, Midtown you don't really think of as industrial, but West Midtown, I guess, is okay. So are there other types of zoning? I mean, you talked a little bit about mixed use development. What other types of things can zoning do?
Yeah, so there is conditional zoning, which is basically, sure, we're going to give you this zoning district, but we're going to add some things to it. And so it can be things like, yes, you can build a preschool here, but you can only have 100 students, and it can only be open from 9 a.m. to like 3 p.m., and things like that. And conditional zoning tends to move with like an individual parcel instead of like a whole group of parcels. There's spot zoning, which
is kind of illegal, isn't it?
It's illegal, but also it's a little bit, it's kind of easy to get around as well. You just say, well, this is in the best interest of the public health, safety, and welfare, and then there you go.
That's what you love to do when you want to try and defeat something. You're just like, that's spot zoning, even if it's touching high density.
Yeah, I mean, there haven't been many modern cases that have ruled something was actually spot zoning. But spot zoning is basically when you have one zoning district, so for example, residential, surrounded by a bunch of industrial, or you have a bunch of industrial and you pick one parcel and you say, we're going to make this residential.
Now, why would someone do that?
Well, I think, in the older sense of it, and the reason why spot zoning is illegal is because you want to serve one person. So James wants to build his house in West Midtown. West Midtown's all industrial, but he wants to build it in this parcel right here, so I'm going to rezone it for James.
You mean I can't donate $2,000 to each commissioner's campaign and say, hey, I've got this development, guys. Please vote in my favor.
No, because zoning is basically the regulation of private property, which I'm sure our forefathers would have been like, what is this? You know, because you're supposed to be able to do what you want on your land. And because zoning is sort of going against that basic notion of my property is my property, there's always a balancing test. Is this in the best interest of the public health, safety, and welfare? And if it's not, if it's just in the best interest of one person, then that becomes an illegal zoning. It's an arbitrary and capricious decision.
Oh, arbitrary and capricious. Another
Make
thing
sure your attorney's putting
out.
all of that in their briefs.
Right.
And it basically means you didn't really have any basis for making that decision. You just picked it because it benefited one person or it benefited your campaign or whatever. And those are things we can't do. So that's why spot zoning is a bad word. New urbanism is sort of a land use zoning term, which is what we're moving towards now, which is a lot of mixed use developments and walkable developments and things like that.
New urbanism, it sounds so hippie.
It is. It's like, it's my favorite
aren't you
thing.
like from San Francisco? You're from the West
I would
Coast.
say I'm a new urbanist.
You're a Berkeley girl.
I'm a Berkeley girl.
Yeah, so you got that new age thing going.
Yeah, and I think walkable communities are great. They tend to be really expensive, but I
use Berkeley girl, but I shouldn't have done that. I don't mean to be derogatory.
No,
Berkeley
I love
woman. You're a Berkeley
Thank you.
woman because
There's exclusionary zoning, which is definitely illegal. Exclusionary zoning is sort of what they had 50s and 60s, which said Black people can't live here, Jewish people can't live there.
Can you zone Black people out somehow?
You used to be able to, but that all has been held
tricky.
Right, unconstitutional. And now what we have is inclusionary zoning, which a lot of cities are using for affordable housing. And basically what inclusionary zoning does is it says, if you want to build in this zoning district, normally they're overlays. So the city of Atlanta does it through an overlay, the Beltline overlay and the West Side overlay. And they're saying,
okay, wait a minute. What is an overlay? You said something very interesting there. I like it.
So you have your underlying zoning district, which could be R1. I could build a house here. C1. I can build a commercial building here. And then you have your overlay, which goes on top of that, which adds even more restraints. A lot of time they're like design restraints and things like that. In the case of the Beltline overlay, it's mostly just design stuff because we want the Beltline to be high density. We want it to be walkable. We want green space. And then inclusionary zoning says, also, if you're going to build here and you're going to build an apartment complex with over 10 units, you need to make 15 to 20% of them affordable. And that's inclusionary zoning. It's called inclusionary zoning because it's making sure that as communities build and get better and, gentrify, which is a controversial word, that we don't forget the people who used to live there before the property taxes went up really high and the values went up really high and the rents went up really high, and we make sure we include them in our plans. And I think, a lot of people have sort of a NYMBY sort of attitude to
NYMBY?
affordable housing. NYMBY
is
is not in my backyard. It kind of is, but it's not in my backyard. And I think people are like, yeah, everyone should be able to live in nice housing, but not by me because I don't want to bring down my property value. And, I don't want those kind of people by me. And
those kind of people, what does that mean?
And it could mean various things depending on where you go, I think there's a lot of stigma with affordable housing and the people that live there. And, all affordable housing is affordable housing. It doesn't necessarily bring more crime. It doesn't necessarily bring trash or traffic. It brings affordable housing. And so inclusionary zoning is one way to do that. That's what they've done in the city of Atlanta. I was very lucky to help draft that ordinance.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very impressive.
With Councilmember Dickens and people from Invest Atlanta and Atlanta Housing. And I think, affordable housing is really important. A lot of cities are getting unaffordable.
Yeah.
And
we get developers here like they want to combine parcels and put up some condos, and of course they're saying we want to build affordable housing, but they're
like mid 400s.
It's a 1,000 1,000 foot flat, and it's $500,000.
Yeah,
So
It's ridiculous.
Yeah. So yeah, that's affordable.
Right. And so zoning is one way to help that by doing inclusionary zoning.
Now, why should we worry about that? I mean, just affordable housing, isn't it okay to just put people all in one area who can afford this and people all in another area who can afford this?
Well, no,
is that not okay?
It's definitely
That's
not
a leading
okay.
question.
I know.
I'm baiting you.
It's definitely not okay, and I think it's not okay because going back to what I said before, it's not in the best interest of the public health, safety, and welfare. We don't want to cast aside people who don't make enough money. And what is enough money really? But you don't want to cast aside people. And in order to have a strong communities and strong neighborhoods, you need mixed developments, not even in the sense of mixed use, but you want people of all different socioeconomic backgrounds, of all different education levels, because that allows all of us to attain,
we gain different perspectives.
Yeah,
we open our eyes to new ideas, new types of people. It's
easier to move up the socioeconomic strata even if I grew up with nothing, if my next door neighbor is a doctor and I see I could be a doctor too. It's much harder to do that when everyone around you is poor and everyone around you is uneducated.
Yeah, got you. Okay, so once again, this is a great show. I love this topic, and I think it's so important. People are like, okay, you're a land guy, you're a property attorney, you're a dirt attorney. So how are you like socially involved? But this we're really highlighting it, and I love that. But give them some contact information for you real quickly.
Sure. So you can contact me at Anamaria, ANAMARA.Hazard, HAZARD @ColemanTally.com.
You're listening to Lewis on the Law, and I have to tell you guys, my show is now AI compatible. We're streaming on every single major online platform. You can go and say, Alexa, play Lewis on the Law, episode 41 with attorney Anamaria Hazard, and voila, Anamaria's voice will, I think I said Anamaria again. It's going to be a hard habit for me to break. Anamaria's voice will come on and tell you all about why zoning and land use is important. And that is pretty impressive. I'm impressed by that. I don't know. I like to say,
cool.
I know we're AI compatible. It's like it's something new, and everyone's AI compatible pretty much. Anybody who is anybody. But when we get back, we're going to talk about a really fascinating new craze. Oh, wait a minute. I have to throw out my legal disclaimer. This show only is designed to bring you information, to empower you, the listener. If you have a serious legal issue, contact an attorney. Do not rely on advice you hear on any one of these programs. All my shows are archived on my website, jameslewislegal.com. This show is not meant to replace the advice of an attorney. If you have a serious legal issue, contact an attorney. If you have a land use issue, contact Anamaria. You can also contact me. My contact information is 404-610-0075. When we get back, we're going to talk tiny houses. You are listening to Lewis on the Law. My name is James Lewis, and I am your host for the next 24 minutes this week. We have an awesome show going for you right now. We're talking land use and zoning, and people are like, that's not really important, but it's really, really important because everybody's got to live somewhere. Everybody's feet touch the dirt. So check yourself before you wreck yourself, guys. Okay, I know, I'm getting away. All my shows are archived on my website. You can go to jameslewislegal.com and you can go back and you can check out any of my shows. They're all archived there. Of course, you don't even need to do that anymore because now they're streaming on Spotify, iTunes. You can go there. Most of my videos are also on my website. If you have an idea for a show, go ahead and email me at james@jameslewislegal.com. You can always give me a call at 404-610-0075. And if I don't know enough about your topic, I'll bring on an attorney who does know something about your topic, and we'll talk about it on air. We've got a lot of questions, and usually it takes about a month for me to actually get an attorney on to talk about that topic. So bear with me if you guys have sent me a request. Okay. This is awesome. This section is awesome because it's something that I see on TV all the time, and it's all the rage, and I completely ignore it because I like to discount it because I don't know how anybody could live in these little bitty teeny tiny houses.
Yeah. So
Okay, teeny. Okay, what does
are
that got to
teeny,
do with
teeny,
zoning? With zoning, what does that got to do with land use? I guess they've got to put them somewhere.
right. So you cannot have a tiny house, or in the city of Atlanta, they're called accessory dwelling units on a foundation, unless your zoning allows for that. So you can't just throw one in your backyard. You will get a zoning inspector who will tell you to pull that down. True story.
Okay.
And so basically, a tiny house is a house under 750 square feet or less. That's how it's defined in the city of Atlanta. And, I'm going to mostly be talking about that. I have most experience there.
You
So
actually
it's
have
pretty
experience
small.
because I've never run across this. I know nothing about the zoning or land use that controls this. I've never run across. Have you run it? I guess as being a city attorney, you've actually run across this.
So the city of Atlanta did what they're calling zoning quick fixes. So they did phase 1, they did phase 2. Phase 3 is rewriting the whole zoning ordinance to a form-based code, which is like a whole other podcast. But
Well, just give me a little bit. What's a form-based
so
code?
a form-based code will show you like pictures of what you're supposed to do, and it's about uses and less about a bunch of words on the page. It's easier to understand, basically.
Okay.
And
And then we'll drop it
user
there
friendly.
because you're right. It's a whole nother show.
I really just saw CLE about what is a form-based code for an hour and a half.
No, you had my interest there. I'm just like, what? You're bringing new stuff here.
Yeah.
I'm stuck on the same thing over and over again. Partition actions, tenants in common, quiet title actions.
Zoning is exciting.
Yeah, it is exciting.
Yeah. So in the city of Atlanta, accessory dwelling units or tiny homes are only allowed on properties zoned R5 or R4. And those are properties that typically would allow duplexes anyway. And when we were going through the public process of this, we got complaints. People didn't want tiny houses, and I was like, "What? Have they not seen the HGTV shows?"
I've actually I love HGTV, but I will not watch those tiny house shows. I refuse to do it.
I like the storage solutions. They're cool. I couldn't live in one. But people thought these are going to be slum houses, and there's going to be a bunch of transient people in them. They're going to be used for Airbnbs and short-term rentals, and we don't want that in our neighborhoods.
Not in my backyard.
Not in my backyard again, NYMBY. So a lot of people don't want them, but a lot of people do want them, and they think that they're a possible solution for affordable housing. It allows people to live in a home with less utility bills, arguably a less housing costs. Most
Is it
places,
really affordable though? I mean,
right?
those
So
places
I
are
don't know that it's really
expensive.
affordable. I have not come across a bank yet that will give you a mortgage for a tiny home.
Okay.
So
That's it. Like I said,
you typically have to pay for it cash.
This is a totally new issue. I've
Yeah.
never run across any issues involving tiny homes.
You typically have to pay for them cash, and they can run from like $15,000 to $150,000 cash. So you can't get a mortgage on that. You might be able to get a personal loan, but that's sounds expensive. You typically either have to own the land or rent it from somebody. And so that's another sort of barrier.
And now, is it because you can take the tiny house? I mean, they do mortgages on homes because they're fixed to the land, so it's an improvement. But is it because that you can pick up and move your tiny home? Is that why it's so hard to get?
Well,
I mean, I'm not a real finance
their
guy.
tiny
so-
homes are small enough for even if they're on a foundation that you can kind of like lift it and
lift
move
it up and move it.
There are also tiny houses on wheels, which are called tows, which are typically
Toes?
tiny house on wheels.
Wow, you're hitting me with all kinds of new info. No, I love this. This is like I've never come across these issues. So
those are typically regulated as our recreation vehicles, RVs, through like the Department of Motor Vehicles. And then the ones on foundations are regulated through the zoning ordinance. And so like in the city of Atlanta, you cannot just buy a plot of land and put a tiny house on it. It has to be, you have to have a principal structure, which is a house. And then you could have a tiny house, hence accessory dwelling unit.
like a ring or a watch.
Yes.
It's an accessory.
Yes. You can't use them for commercial use. Currently in the city of Atlanta.
Wait a minute, that would be a great commercial.
It would be
use.
a really
Bring
nice
little,
office.
Bring
right.
a little tiny home and then sell
But
like
they're
tacos out of it.
So when we think about zoning, if you have to have a principal structure there, if you have to have a house there, and it's zoned, it has to be zoned R4 and R5. Those are residential districts. So the purpose of the residential districts is for houses and neighborhoods. So we don't want office use there unless it's a home occupation. We don't want commercial use there because it was zoned for residential. And so that's why, you can't have commercial uses there. Which we'll get into a little bit later is you can't have Airbnbs there. You can't have short-term rentals there because that is a commercial use. Airbnbs mimic a hotel.
Now, okay, so are these zoning restrictions on tiny houses? Is it widespread, or is it just a city of Atlanta thing?
It varies, but it's pretty similar.
Mm-hmm.
Because it goes back again to sort of the foundations of zoning. The old school Euclidean zoning is that we want to separate uses, and even the new school zoning, we still want uses to be compatible, and we want to foster strong communities and strong neighborhoods. And it's hard to do that when you have people going in and out that don't really live there, that don't really care about the neighborhood. It's hard to do that when you have people who just set up their business there and they don't live there. And so, when you're thinking about city planning and land use law and zoning, you have to think about sort of like the underlying principles a lot, and then it helps make the other stuff make sense.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that is really interesting because when I graduated from law school, I came out right during the 5G or the initial start of the 5G rollout and small cells. And most of these small towns that we went into, they didn't even know what a small cell was. Yeah. So they're like, what? You want to put a tower up? Right. No, we just want to attach a small cell.
We're going to get cancer.
Exactly. There was we're going to get cancer, and then the people coming out with pitchforks.
But you can't even tell. Like,
torches.
they're on a lot of churches. They're on a lot of schools, on a lot of street lamps.
Yeah.
And you have really good cell service.
Exactly. Yeah. And but a lot of the siting statutes, a lot of the zoning or statutes didn't actually have anything in place for siting of small cells. So I was wondering if that actually happens with the tiny accessory dwellings. I mean,
yeah. And so what happens with all this sort of like newfangled thing with zoning is, once you write your zoning ordinance, in City of Atlanta's zoning ordinance was written in 1982, 1983. There's since been amendments, but the zoning ordinance is the 1982 zoning ordinance of the City of Atlanta, and there's stuff in there that was cool in 1982. Like, there's billiards in there, and then there's a self-service station, because at the time, not all gas stations were self-service. There's like a game parlor, and so it's only as modernized when you write it. And then there are all these things that happen, like dockless scooters and electric bikes and tiny houses and short-term rentals.
Dockless scooters, are those scooters, those bird
scooters
that
Ubers,
I see all
Lyft.
over the place?
Yeah, and so all these things come in, and then the zoning administrators are like, I don't even know. Like, we don't have regulations for this. So they have to figure out how to use it, and then it comes down to, okay, what kind of use is this? So for tiny houses, we can say, well, essentially this is a residential use. It should be allowed in residential areas, especially areas that are already zoned for two-family dwellings, like duplexes and quadruplexes and all things like that. And then when you think about short-term rental, it gets complicated. And so those are all the things you have to contemplate when you're doing a zoning ordinance. As soon as you put it on paper, it's going to be antiquated.
I know, right? It's already outdated.
Yeah.
Okay, we're at the end of this segment. This is a great show. I love this topic. Will you give them some contact information for you, Anamaria?
Sure. Anamaria Hazard at Coleman Tally. And my email is Anamaria, ANAMARA .Hazard, HAZARD at ColemanTally.com.
You're listening to Lewis on the Law, and once again, I'd like to let you guys know that we are on almost every single national streaming platform that you can think of, so you can now hear this show anywhere in the United States. Anamaria, if you have relatives in California, you can just tell them to play Lewis on the Law episode 41. Is it 41 or 42 we're at? Something like that. I'll let you know exactly, and with attorney Anamaria Hazard, and your voice will pull up. So It's really, really cool. We're everywhere, and we're about to go, or actually we are, nationwide.
Nice.
Maybe even worldwide. When we get back, we've got a lot of stuff coming up. Actually, it's our last segment. Time flies when you're having fun. We're going to talk about Anamaria's worldwide vision of how we can include everyone. Okay? No, that's great stuff, and I can't wait to hear it. You are listening to Lewis on the Law. My name is James Lewis, and this is a great show. I have attorney Anamaria Hazard on with me, and we are talking land use and zoning. And if you guys didn't think land use and zoning was important, after listening to this show, I hope you have changed your mind, because it affects everybody from the poor to the wealthy to the, I don't care. Even if you don't care, you can actually be affected.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have to get into this. I mean, this grand, and you said you had an idea, which is why I want to throw this out. How can cities create this inclusive culture that combines people of all races, the poor, the rich, all living in perfect harmony? Because I know Ryan Gravel thought he had an idea, and it didn't work out that way.
And I think he had a good start. I think so. His vision for the Beltline was green space, transportation, economic development, affordable housing. I think all of that is how you create inclusive communities, but it takes also people other than the government being involved. But I think,
what kind of people?
I think corporations. So a lot of the reason why we have areas that are unaffordable is because we have people that don't make enough money to afford them, because minimum wage is low, because they're getting paid part-time. And so I think, one big step in the right direction is to increase wages, because then now people can afford to live places.
That's a whole show and a can of worms in itself,
show, right? I think another alternative is sort of what they did in the city of Playa Vista in LA. Well, it's not a real city. In Playa Vista in LA is they created housing for teachers, medical professionals, first responders that make under a certain amount of money that live or work in the area. And so that is saying, hey, we want teachers and doctors and or not doctors, I'm sorry. they probably go above the income threshold. But we want teachers and nurses and police officers who really care.
You say that doctors and people lump lawyers in there too, but I
just came out of affordable housing bracket.
I feel like I'm a working class guy here.
You could qualify if you make under enough, but it's just saying, hey, these are people that are important to, again, the public health, safety, and welfare, and we want them to be able to live in these areas. And so that takes a lot of public-private partnerships. It takes governments giving money and developers willing to develop units that serve those people. I also think, mixed-use developments are a good way to provide affordable housing. If you live by your job, maybe you don't need a car. That allows you to put that money towards your house. If you live by a grocery store, don't need a car, allows you to put your money towards that house. Along the same vein, if we had really great public transportation, then people could get from Southwest Atlanta, where you can legitimately rent a nice apartment for under $1,000 up to Buckhead efficiently, and they would be complaining less about not having access to affordable housing. Because
that public transportation question, that is an ugly question. There's all kinds of, you've been keeping up with the Gwinnett County MARTA expansion. There are all kinds of ugly things that get thrown out there. And again,
that goes to NYMBYism, right? Not in my backyard. And I think if you really care about people and communities and safe neighborhoods, then you got to get rid of that. There's a lot of theft and crime in Buckhead, and a lot of those people that are stealing and robbing don't come from Buckhead, but what they see is, I have nothing where I'm from, and you have a lot where you're from. If we had communities that were more inclusive, we would have less of that animosity and probably less crime and less violence, because everyone would care about their neighborhood and their neighbors. So I think, the solve to affordable housing and inclusive communities is a little bit of zoning, but a lot more of other things.
Okay, so it has to be a public-private partnership?
Yeah.
Okay.
Businesses have to care. You can still care about your bottom line and realize that there are certain things that can affect your bottom line maybe in the long term. If you have housing for your workers that don't make a lot of money, you'll probably have more loyal workers,
Yeah, got it. That's a big ask, because
it's huge. It's not a simple solution.
I mean, I could just take a look at myself as an example. I mean, at a certain point, I did have high ideals, and it's, I don't want to say I've lost them, but sometimes you get mired in the muck of everyday life.
Yeah.
And just today I take a pro bono client through Atlanta Legal Aid or Atlanta Volunteer Lawyers, and I usually do landlord tenant defense. But today I had another person approach me and asked me for representation, but they didn't have very much money.
Yeah.
They came from Atlanta Legal Aid, and they're in a heavy duty litigation battle. So I felt bad because I don't feel like I can represent them for what they have, and then you end up feeling like, oh my God, I've lost my way. I've lost my ideals that I once had.
It's not an easy solution, and it's hard. It's really hard to worry about other people, and you're like, I need to try to figure out my own things.
But businesses have that same thing. Even if a business has that ideal, then all of a sudden they have, shareholders who are demanding profits, and why are you doing this when it's not profitable? And so so things get lost. So
but it could
it's a
be
big
profitable. You have things like Tom's that they give their shoes back. Warby Parker. I'm wearing Warby Parker glasses right now because I'm like, wow, these glasses are inexpensive. Also, they give glasses to people who need them. I think nowadays, especially with millennials, having a heart in your corporation is attractive to a lot of people and can bring you even more revenue while helping people.
That is awesome, and that is something I hope, and I'm glad that you still have. I love it. You still have those ideals. You've kept your soul intact.
I'm fresh out of the government. I think the government tries to make you hold on to that, and Coleman Talley, they represent affordable housing developers, and affordable housing is really important to them. And so, I had to make strategic moves to sort of keep my soul a little bit. But
okay, well, that's good. Then I blame it on the fact that I worked for in the belly of the beast for the corporate man for several years.
Worked for the man too long, James.
Yeah, right. I worked for the man too long. Okay, so let's get into this short-term rental. What are you talking about when you're talking about a short-term rental? Is that the whole,
so a short-term rental like Airbnb, VRBO, HomeAway, basically any place you're staying less than 30 days. Because once you get to 30 days, it sort of turns into a lease.
Month to month, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And people use these to replace hotels. They're a lot more affordable, but they are transient. And so you're getting away from creating strong neighborhoods and more to attracting tourism. They often are in residential areas, and arguably an Airbnb is not a residential use. And then again, NYMBYism, people want to stay in Airbnbs when they travel, but they don't want to spend $500,000 for their condo, and the person next door is only going to be there for 2 days because they're renting it out for Airbnb. I think
is there a zoning consideration here, or is there a use consideration? Are they not allowed in some areas?
Yeah, because they're not a residential use.
I'm just asking this question because I've never done an Airbnb. I've never been involved in an Airbnb issue. So.
Yeah, so a lot of municipalities have regulations for them, like Philadelphia, Charleston, Savannah. Some of them outright ban them. Some of them allow them in certain ways, but it is a non-residential use in typically a residential area. And so the issue comes on the enforcement side, though. In order for someone to issue a zoning citation, they have to witness the zoning citation, right?
Yeah,
witness the violation.
I'm like, that's my cousin. They're staying there for a month.
So if it's like a fence that's too high, sure, I can see that. But if someone's calling and like, hey, James is renting out his house, you have the right to have guests at your house.
Exactly.
You have the right to rent out your house, not rent out your house, but have a wedding at your house occasionally. Maybe
or let your cousin stay at your house for a week.
Let your cousin stay at your house for a week. Let your child stay at your house and tell them they need to pay rent and things like that. So it's difficult to walk on a property and say, yes, that's an Airbnb renter. When you go on the websites, they don't really give enough information. And so often you have to create the regulation to catch the violation. You can create a regulation that says you have to have a permit. And if you don't have a permit and you're posting on Airbnb with no permit, that's a violation. And then we can cite you. But
wait a minute. Do you guys have like people who, or when you were with the city, did you have people, I know you don't anymore, but did you have people who actually checked out the Airbnb websites and did that type of enforcement?
So the second problem is resources. So do we have enough zoning inspectors to check all that stuff? And so this is again short-term rentals, dockless mobility devices, scooters, and things like that, because they're so newfangled and they're internet-based, it's really hard to cite people for them and to regulate them.
Anamaria, you have been an awesome guest. I really do mean that, because I love this topic, and you bring some new things to this topic that because a lot of times the attorneys that come on that do real estate or property, they're kind of like me. They're doing what happens in the courtroom at this point, and that didn't used to be me, but it is me these days. So this has been a great show. Give them some contact information for you once again.
Thanks. Again, my name is Anamaria Hazard. I am at Coleman Talley, which is a law firm, a full-service law firm, but I do municipal law, commercial real estate, land use, and zoning. We're located across the street from Lenox Mall, and you can contact me at Anamaria, ANAMARA .Hazard, HAZARD at colemantalley.com.
Anamaria, I hope I can have you on again at another time, because we did not get through everything all the questions that I wanted to ask you. You're listening to Lewis on the Law. This has been the end of this show. Before I leave, I've got to thank the guys who make the magic happen. And you know what? I said I was going to look up new words to rhyme with it, but I did not. So I have the guardian of sound over there, Mr. Sam Davis, and the villainous viper of video over there, Anthony Cook. They're making the magic happen, guys. We'll see you next week.